What if I told you that most famous war movies get absolutely destroyed by the actual people who lived through it? Veterans of World War II have spent decades watching Hollywood butcher their stories, and, shockingly, they actually agree on which films nail the truth. Here's the jaw-dropping part. The movies they respect most aren't always the blockbusters everyone talks about. We're counting down the 20 greatest World War II films according to real combat veterans, from brutally authentic grit to unforgettable human drama. Stick around because number one absolutely blow your mind. The Longest Day, 1962. Hollywood threw $130 million at this thing in today's money, and somehow nailed it. The Longest Day reconstructs D-Day, June 6, 1944, from multiple angles. Allied soldiers, German defenders, French resistance fighters, and ordinary civilians caught in the crossfire. What makes veterans lose their minds about this film is that director Ken Annakin actually listened to the people who were there. Real D-Day participants, actual military advisors, and former German officers sat down and explained what actually happened on those beaches. The film employs an international ensemble cast featuring John Wayne, Robert Mitchum, and Richard Burton, but the star here is authenticity itself. Filmmakers shot on the exact Normandy beaches where thousands died just 18 years before, and you feel that weight in every frame. Critics initially dismissed it as bloated and overstuffed with stars, but veterans who survived Omaha Beach called it hauntingly accurate. The film cost Darryl F. Zanuck his entire fortune to make, but audiences made it the fourth highest-grossing film of that year, and veterans still recommend it to younger generations. A Walk in the Sun, 1945. Here's a film so understated that most people completely forgot it existed. Released while the war was still raging, A Walk in the Sun follows an American platoon landing near Salerno, Italy, and tasked with advancing 6 miles inland to capture a strategic farmhouse. What's absolutely brilliant about this film is what it deliberately avoids. There's almost zero glamorous gunplay. Most battles happen completely off-camera, which creates this suffocating tension where characters hear explosions and chaos but never witness the action directly. It's like watching war through anxiety rather than action sequences. Director Robert Siodmak understood something crucial. Real soldiers spend 90% of their time waiting and moving, and 10% actually fighting. The pacing deliberately speeds up and slows down, mimicking authentic combat experience. Veterans consistently praise this film because it captures the psychological reality of warfare rather than the Hollywood version. The narrative focuses on survival and forward momentum rather than heroic moments. Actors spend entire scenes listening to distant gunfire, and that's where the real horror lives. Cinematography captures the Italian countryside with stunning realism, and performances feel genuinely exhausted rather than theatrically brave. War historians have called it the most honest portrayal of the Italian campaign ever filmed. Come and see. 1985, Lema Klimov created something so devastatingly real that most mainstream audiences refuse to acknowledge its existence. Come and See plunges viewers directly into the Nazi occupation of Belarus through the eyes of a teenage boy named Floria, who joins Soviet partisans. This isn't entertainment. This is psychological warfare on film. The narrative descends into increasingly horrific sequences of massacres, destruction, and complete moral collapse. What absolutely shatters veterans watching this film is that Klimov apparently understood something they never wanted to talk about in detail. War fundamentally transforms human beings into something unrecognizable. The camera doesn't look away when civilians get executed. When soldiers step over the corpses of their friends killed moments before, the film doesn't cut. Instead, it forces you to experience that numbness. Shot with surreal intensity, mixed with documentary realism, Come and See operates on a completely different frequency from typical war cinema. The lead performance by Alexei Kravchenko captures youthful innocence completely disappearing, replaced by vacant trauma that haunts every frame. Veterans who actually served in Eastern European theaters described this film as the only one that even approaches authentic representation of that particular horror. It won multiple film festival awards, but refuses to become comfortable viewing. Most critics warn viewers it's emotionally devastating, but that's exactly why veterans respect it. This film doesn't celebrate warfare. It shows the actual cost in human consciousness. Saving Private Ryan, 1998. Steven Spielberg walked onto the set, determined to revolutionize how cinema depicts warfare, and he absolutely succeeded. Saving Private Ryan opens with perhaps the most shocking, visceral combat sequence in film history. The D-Day landing at Omaha Beach, where approximately 1,000 men died in the first few minutes. The camera shakes, blood clouds the water, soldiers get cut in half by machine gun fire. It's so authentically terrifying that some World War II veterans actually walked out of theaters. Captain John Miller and his squad receive orders to locate and rescue Private James Ryan, whose brothers all died in action, forcing them to traverse war-torn France while confronting loss, loyalty, and moral complexity. Tom Hanks delivers one of cinema's finest performances as a commander slowly losing his grip on sanity and justification. The film didn't just win 5 Academy Awards, it reset the entire genre. Every war film made afterward had to reckon with Saving Private Ryan's unflinching brutality. Budget totaled $160 million in today's money, but Spielberg spent it wisely on practical effects, actual explosions, and military consultants who explained exactly what that first wave experienced. Veterans appreciated that Spielberg refused to sentimentalize the ending. The squad doesn't ride off into sunsets. They survive scarred and permanently changed. The film grossed over $600 million worldwide and fundamentally altered how Hollywood approaches war storytelling. Schindler's List, 1993. This film isn't a war movie. It's a Holocaust memorial constructed in black and white and human suffering. Steven Spielberg directed Schindler's List as his most important artistic statement, focusing on Oskar Schindler, a German industrialist initially motivated purely by profit, who gradually becomes a reluctant savior. Liam Neeson plays Schindler as a man discovering his own humanity through horror. Ralph Fiennes delivers a performance of such chilling evil as Amon Guth that every scene with him becomes unbearable. The film documents Schindler's journey from opportunist manufacturing weapons for the Nazi regime to someone who systematically saves over 1,000 Jewish lives by employing them in his factories. Shot almost entirely in stark black and white cinematography, the film refuses visual comfort. Nothing looks beautiful. Everything looks dehumanizing. Spielberg worked with survivors and historians to ensure absolute accuracy in depicting concentration camp procedures, Nazi bureaucracy, and the methodical machinery of genocide. The emotional weight becomes almost unbearable in sequences showing the final evacuation of the Krakow ghetto. Veterans and Holocaust survivors consistently describe Schindler's List as essential viewing because it refuses to diminish or sanitize the atrocities. The film won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and remains the most powerful cinematic statement against hatred ever made. It changed how Hollywood approaches Holocaust storytelling entirely. The Great Escape, 1963. Picture the most ambitious prisoner breakout ever attempted during war. The Great Escape dramatizes the true story of Allied prisoners escaping from Stalag Luft III, a supposedly impregnable German camp. Director John Sturges assembled an absolutely stacked cast including Steve McQueen, James Garner, Charles Bronson, and Richard Attenborough to recreate the mass breakout that captivated the world. The film meticulously details how prisoners dug tunnels, forged documents, created escape equipment, and coordinated one of history's most audacious military operations. McQueen's character, Captain Hiltz, becomes iconically rebellious, constantly testing boundaries and attempting escape. The famous motorcycle chase sequence showcases McQueen performing his own stunts despite being a mediocre skier, riding full speed toward the Swiss border. Budget of $4 million created an authentic German prison camp set on a Bavarian soundstage with real POWs serving as technical advisors. Elmer Bernstein composed an unforgettable musical score that became one of cinema's most recognizable themes. What veterans genuinely appreciate is how the film balances humor with genuine tragedy. The real operation ended with 50 prisoners executed by the Gestapo, a fact the film refuses to hide. Only 3 of 76 actual escapees reached freedom. Critics initially dismissed it as popcorn entertainment, but the movie's refusal to sanitize the ending, The Bridge on the River Kwai, 1957, David Lean created an absolute masterpiece about the blurred line between collaboration and duty. The Bridge on the River Kwai follows British prisoners of war forced by Japanese captors to construct a railway bridge through the Burmese jungle. Colonel Nicholson, brilliantly portrayed by Alec Guinness in an Oscar-winning performance, becomes obsessed with building the bridge as a symbol of British pride and military excellence. What makes this psychologically devastating is that Nicholson doesn't realize Allied forces plan to destroy his bridge. He's working toward his own objective's destruction while believing in the righteousness of his mission. The narrative explores how captivity, duty, and obsession can completely distort judgment. Japanese officers maintain brutal discipline, while Nicholson attempts to protect his men through cooperation and structure. Stunning cinematography captures the jungle's suffocating beauty and horror simultaneously. The film examines themes of honor, obsession, pride, and the impossible choices soldiers face under extreme duress. Veterans consistently mention this film because it portrays the psychological toll of captivity far better than action sequences ever could. Alec Guinness delivers subtle, heartbreaking work as a man destroying himself through misplaced honor. Climactic bridge destruction sequence rivals anything in action cinema but carries actual emotional weight because audiences understand the human cost. The film won 7 Academy Awards and remains one of cinema's most thoughtful explorations of military psychology. Dunkirk, 2017. Christopher Nolan stripped away every non-essential element and created cinematic poetry from chaos. Dunkirk reconstructs the 1940 evacuation of 300,000 Allied troops from the beaches of northern France in real time across 3 intersecting timelines: land, sea, and air. Hans Zimmer's haunting score creates constant psychological pressure. Minimal dialogue forces characters to communicate through expressions and actions. Nolan refused dialogue explaining what's happening because soldiers in actual combat don't understand the larger situation. They only know their immediate circumstances. The film employs practical effects exclusively, with real explosions, actual water, and genuine discomfort on actors' faces. Cinematography captures the desperate fight for survival against relentless German forces with claustrophobic intensity. What veterans appreciate is that Nolan never explains why individuals are there or provides character backstory. These are interchangeable soldiers fighting for survival. The narrative emphasizes collective heroism and ordinary courage rather than individual heroics. Fionn Whitehead's young soldier captures wide-eyed terror perfectly. Tom Hardy communicates entire emotional journeys through gestures and muffled radio transmissions. The film grossed over $500 million globally and earned critical acclaim for its visceral authenticity and refusal to sentimentalize warfare. War historians praised its historically accurate depiction of Letters from Iwo Jima, 2006. Clint Eastwood created something revolutionary by telling the Battle of Iwo Jima exclusively from the Japanese perspective. Letters from Iwo Jima follows General Tatamichi Kuribayashi and Private Seigo as they mount a desperate defense against overwhelming American forces. The film employs discovered letters between soldiers, revealing personal fears, hopes, and sense of duty that humanize men fighting for a cause most viewers oppose. Shot almost entirely in Japanese, the film refuses to provide Americans as anchoring characters. Japanese soldiers become fully realized human beings rather than faceless enemies. Ken Watanabe delivers a nuanced performance as a general attempting to preserve soldiers' lives despite orders for suicidal resistance. Cinematography emphasizes the island's brutal terrain and the futility of defending impossible positions. Veterans from both nations respected this film because it showed war's fundamental human truth. Soldiers on all sides experience identical fears and desperately want survival. The film won 4 Academy Awards and fundamentally challenged how American cinema portrays conflict. Audiences appreciated seeing enemy soldiers depicted with dignity and complexity rather than demonization. Critics praised the film's emotional weight and refusal to celebrate destruction. The screenplay crafted genuine tragedy from historical events. Eastwood demonstrated that understanding enemy perspective creates more powerful cinema than dehumanizing opposition. Das Boot, 1981. Wolfgang Petersen directed the most claustrophobic film ever made about naval warfare. Das Boot immerses viewers aboard a German U-boat during the Battle of the Atlantic, capturing the submarine's suffocating confinement and constant terror. The narrative follows a war correspondent embedded with the crew, experiencing underwater combat from the German perspective. Tight cinematography never allows viewers escape from the submarine's claustrophobic spaces. Equipment seems to press inward. Corridors feel impossibly narrow. Air becomes precious. The crew initially appears hardened and ideologically committed, but gradually reveal doubt, desperation, and complete exhaustion. The film refuses traditional heroic narratives. Instead, it shows war's grinded monotony and the psychological toll of constant danger without actual action. Silence becomes as terrifying as explosions. Mechanical failures create horror. The budget reached $12 million in today's money, but Petersen spent it constructing a full-scale U-boat interior that actors could genuinely inhabit. Submarine captains and crew members served as technical advisors, ensuring authentic operations and procedures. Veterans and military historians consistently rank Das Boot among cinema's greatest achievements. Understanding enemy soldiers creates more powerful cinema than dehumanizing them. The narrative refuses providing easy moral justification, treating German sailors as human beings rather than cartoon villains. Rome Open City, 1945. Roberto Rossellini created neorealist cinema's greatest masterpiece while literally stepping over World War II's Nauschutz. Shot shortly after Nazi occupation ended, Rome Open City documents Italian resistance fighters attempting survival against brutal Gestapo persecution. The narrative follows a brave priest, a determined mother, and ordinary citizens risking everything for freedom. What makes this film absolutely revolutionary is that Rossellini filmed on actual Rome. Streets still bearing occupation scars. Real locations replaced studio sets. Minimal cinematography emphasized documentary realism rather than cinematic beauty. The film captured genuine exhaustion on actors' faces because conditions remained genuinely terrible. Anna Magnani delivers a heartbreaking performance as a mother protecting her family amid chaos. The Gestapo's brutality receives unflinching portrayal with shocking frankness. When Trumpets Fade, 1998. This HBO production tells the Hurtgen Forest battle through genuinely exhausted eyes. The Hurtgen Forest campaign remains one of World War II's grimmest and most pointless operations, where Americans advanced roughly 1 mile through dense forest at horrific human cost. Ron Eldard plays a reluctant private suddenly thrust into command when his entire unit gets systematically destroyed. Young, inexperienced soldiers must survive in miserable, muddy terrain with minimal strategic objective. The film captures absolute bleakness through deliberate pacing and refusal to provide comforting narrative structure. Military historians describe the real operation as a meat grinder, and the film translates that awful description directly. Every decision carries fatal consequences. Soldiers die from inexperience and bad luck rather than dramatic confrontations. The cinematography emphasizes mud, darkness, and complete sensory deprivation. Sound design creates constant disorientation through distant explosions and screams. Veterans consistently described When Trumpets Fade as more realistic than Savin' Private Ryan's opening sequence. The film refuses heroism or redemptive narratives. Instead, it shows young men dying for the insanity of command decisions. Critical reception emphasized the film's gutting authenticity and refusal to entertain audiences. Acting delivers convincing exhaustion and trauma. Character arcs follow descent toward accepting probable death. The Dirty Dozen, 1967. Robert Aldrich assembled 12 convicted military criminals for a suicide mission, creating cinema's most morally complex war film. The Dirty Dozen follows Major John Reisman assigning 12 prisoners convicted of serious crimes to infiltrate a heavily fortified German chateau and eliminate high-ranking Nazi officers. The training sequences build genuine camaraderie among irredeemable men forced into cooperation. Lee Marvin delivers a career-defining performance as a world-weary commander, understanding that winning wars requires doing terrible things. The ensemble cast includes Charles Bronson. Each character brings unique chaos and damaged psychology. The climactic chateau assault delivers spectacular action without traditional heroics. Heroes emerge as rapists, murderers, and psychopaths barely civilized than opposing forces. What made this film shocking was its refusal to glorify violence or suggest redemption. The narrative acknowledges that winning requires becoming monstrous. Critics divided sharply, with some praising unflinching realism while others condemned its moral nihilism. Where Eagles Dare, 1968, Richard Burton and Clint Eastwood infiltrate a Nazi castle in the Bavarian Alps in cinema's greatest men-on-a-mission thriller. Alistair MacLean wrote the screenplay specifically for the screen, knowing exactly how to construct perfectly constructed action sequences. The narrative follows British agents attempting to rescue an American general from an impregnable mountain fortress. Burton desperately needed a box office success after several commercial failures, delivering his most physical performance. Eastwood's character kills approximately 74 German soldiers, earning the nickname The Machine from crew members. The budget reached $7.7 million, justified by spectacular alpine locations filmed at the actual Schloss Hohenwerfen Castle in Austria. Winter conditions dropped to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, with crew members suffering altitude sickness. MacLean's screenplay becomes a masterclass in twists and reveals, where every character possesses hidden loyalties. The rescue mission reveals layers of deception. Nothing proceeds according to expectations. Overlord, 1975. Stuart Cooper created something genuinely experimental by blending archival World War II footage with fictional narrative. Overlord tells the story of young British conscript Tom Beddoes undergoing training while experiencing disturbing premonitions about his D-Day fate. Cinematographer John Alcott employed vintage lenses, ensuring seamless integration between historical footage and new dramatization. The blending never feels jarring. Instead, historical footage comments on fictional narrative. Actual combat footage becomes the protagonist's nightmare landscape. What makes Overlord absolutely unique is its meditation on individual vulnerability amid massive historical machinery. Tom represents millions of young men sent to probable death without understanding larger strategic objectives. The film refuses narrative comfort or heroic redemption. Instead, it follows an ordinary soldier discovering his insignificance within enormous military operation. The Berlin International Film Festival awarded it the Silver Bear, recognizing its artistic achievement. Veterans appreciated that the film treated conscription as tragic rather than honorable. Many young men went to war not from patriotic conviction, but from governmental coercion. Critical reception emphasized the film's haunting, poetic approach. The blending of archival footage creates constant reminder that history's human cost remains immense. Modern audiences often overlook Overlord because it lacks action sequences or clear narrative drive. Instead, it operates as meditation on historical trauma and individual powerlessness against institutional forces. The Train, 1964. Burt Lancaster muscles his way through occupied France in an underground masterpiece about art, resistance, and impossible moral choices. The Train follows French railway inspector Paul Leibisch, attempting to prevent Nazi Colonel von Waldheim from shipping stolen masterpieces to Germany. What separates this film from typical action cinema is its intellectual weight. Screenwriter Franklin Cohen based the script on real art theft operations, and the film questions whether paintings are worth human lives. Lancaster produced the film and insisted on practical effects rather than miniatures, resulting in spectacular train sequences. Director John Frankenheimer crafted a taut action thriller while exploring genuine moral complexity. The production destroyed 6 real locomotives and derailed dozens of train cars, making it one of the most expensive action films of the decade. Lancaster performed many stunts himself at age 51, dislocating his shoulder during one sequence, but completing the scene. The climactic train crash took 6 weeks of planning and was filmed with multiple cameras capturing genuine destruction. Critics initially found the intellectual questions too cerebral for an action movie, but the film gained cult status among cinephiles. A Man Escaped, 1956. Robert Bresson created something so austere and minimalist that it revolutionized filmmaking itself. A Man Escaped dramatizes the true story of André Devigny, a French resistance fighter captured and imprisoned at Fort Montluc-Lyon. The narrative becomes almost monastic in its focus on small details and objects acquiring crucial significance. Devigny's internal voiceover dominates the soundtrack. Faces of non-professional actors reveal everything through subtle expressions. Off-screen sound creates psychological space and constant awareness of danger beyond the cell. The film refuses dramatic exposition or conventional storytelling. Instead, viewers gradually piece together Devigny's systematic preparation for escape. He acquires materials. He tests possibilities. Casablanca, 1942. Michael Curtis created Hollywood's greatest love story, but it's genuinely a war film about moral choice during crisis. Casablanca follows cynical American Rick Blaine running a nightclub in Vichy-controlled Morocco, a city teeming with refugees, intrigue, and resistance fighters. When his former lover Ilsa reappears with her resistance leader husband, Rick must choose between personal happiness and greater causes. The film's brilliance rests. The Cranes Are Flying, 1957. Mikhail Kalatozov created cinema's most devastating love story about the impact of war on human hearts. The Cranes Are Flying follows two young Moscow lovers whose relationship gets destroyed when they're separated by World War II without even saying goodbye. Kalatozov's approach channels cinematic poetry rather than conventional narrative. The film allows audiences to absorb tremendous sympathy without logical explanation. Emotional truth matters more than plot mechanics. The narrative follows both characters through war's devastation, showing how conflict separates people while connecting them through shared trauma. Cinematography emphasizes beauty and destruction simultaneously. Moscow's architecture and landscapes become character commentary. The protagonist, Veronica, endures unimaginable suffering, while her lover, Ivan, becomes missing and presumed dead.